Thank you for taking the time to participate on this live stream debut of the Codings Talk Leadership Series. To launch this series of 4 interviews focused on leadership is Oakland McCulloch. Okay, here's a backgrounder on Oak.
I am retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. I am an author and an accomplished speaker. Both my book and my leadership presentation are based on my 40-plus years of leadership experience. Today's leaders have a responsibility to inspire the leaders of tomorrow. I absolutely believe great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nation. You can substitute that word nations for any organization you want. A company, a hospital, military, food bank, university, sports teams, and it does not change the power of that statement one bit. Every organization needs good leaders to be successful. Good leaders are important at every level and in every profession. I am a strong believer that the best leaders are servant leaders. Being a good leader is not about you, and yet it is all about you. It is all about how you empower your people to become all they can be, and the legacy you leave for the organization you have the privilege to.
Every organization, every company can use great leaders. Joining me tonight for the debut of the leadership series from Codings Talk is Oakland McCulloch. Oakland, welcome.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jim, and call me Oak.
Oak, I'll call you Oak.
Yeah.
Oak, if you could do a favor, if you could provide a little additional background. I played the video there for you, but provide a little bit of additional background, and also let's talk about some of the leadership and other motivational things that you do for various industries.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Yeah, so I did 23 years in the Army on active duty as a combat arms officer, and retired in 2009 as a lieutenant colonel. I ran a food bank for a couple of years. Don't get much different than that. And then now I currently do recruiting for Army ROTC until I retire later on this year. And I'm really retiring because I like what I do, but I'm retiring so that I can write my second book and concentrate on my speaking engagements. I've been on about 13 or 14 paid engagements now. And everything from universities to multi-million-dollar companies and everything in between, including conferences for HR, conferences for first responders. I'm doing the fire chiefs for the state of Oregon later on this month. So really just talking about what it takes to be a good leader, because I don't think we're doing a good job right now producing leaders.
No, you're right. And Oak, where we started a conversation and we kind of found each other, and then I started talking a little bit about I work in the global protective coatings and then the corrosion industry. So the two different industries that kind of work together a lot on a lot of the infrastructure projects and all these things that we got going on that, kind of fight, the scourge of corrosion and things like that. And with my industry, the one thing the feedback I get from a lot of people I talk with is that, what are we doing to first inspire the next generation to step into the roles that a lot of people hold within my industries, but also too, how do we inspire those new leaders to, take the call, take the challenge, step up, become effective and really impactful leaders. And well, a lot of it comes down to really is being comfortable as a leader. And in your book, and we'll talk about your book to the tail end of our conversation this evening, you talk about the importance of having a vision and a plan. How important is it to have a vision and a plan?
Yeah, well, I think that a leader's number one job is to build culture, and we may talk about that later, and happy to talk about that. Number two is the vision and the plan of the organization, where you want it to be 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's the leader's job, to come up with that plan, that vision of where they want them to be. Then I think if you really want to motivate your people to get you there, and let's be honest, you're not the one getting them there. It's going to be the people who work for you are going to get you where you want to go. Then you got to include them in the plan. let them have some say in the plan of how you're going to get there. You got to have the major part of it, but there's parts of it that they certainly can be included in that conversation. And then I think two things happen. Number one, it's no longer your plan, it is our plan. And so now they got skin in the game, so they're willing to work a little bit extra hard to make those things happen. But I think also what it does is it shows them that you care about them, care about their opinion. You want to hear what they have to say. Look, I don't care how long you've been a leader, you don't have all the answers. You don't have all the knowledge. You have to use the people that you have in your organization. You got to train them and do all those kinds of things, but you got to use that knowledge and that skill if you want your organization to be as good as it can be. And I think one of the things that key leaders don't do is they don't communicate down to the lowest level worker in their organization what their part of that plan is. I always tell people, if you ask me to come talk to your organization, I walk in and one of the first things I do is I figure out what your vision is, and I go down to your lowest ranking person in your organization. I ask them what their vision is. They might be able to tell me, or they might not be able to. And then I ask them, what's your part in it? And that's where they look at me like deer in the headlight looks.
Yeah, you know, with your background being in the military, you know, you always hear that you go to war, you go to battle with the army you have, not the one that you want to have. And I think, you know, for your lessons and life lessons, being a military person, is that you work with what you got, you motivate, you really kind of cultivate and make them the machine that you're looking for, you know, the unit and things like that. The same thing with a company is that a lot of times if people don't know what their part of the vision or mission is, you know, how do they get it? How do they really get invested into it? And I think that's where you see a lot of that disconnect. And then that also plays against someone who might get disillusioned. They're like, well, you know, my boss is very ineffective. I don't think I want to become a leader because, you know, I might wind up like that too.
Yeah.
So the other thing too that I've noticed in really talking with people and reading a lot on surveys that are done when it comes to leadership, one of the biggest issues is communication. And communication is so vital, it's so critical, it's so important. But what are some of your recommendations you have for emerging leaders or leaders that are already leading, you know, to become effective communicators, especially of that vision and that mission?
Yeah, I mean, communication is important, whether you're a leader or anything. If you want to be successful in life, you got to be able to communicate, period. And I think, you know, that is huge across the board. Every part of leadership, it's about writing, whether that's writing memos or email or text, and I'm a firm believer, handwritten notes. I think handwritten notes, you can never underestimate the power of a handwritten note. It's about talking. It's about non-verbal body language. It's also the thing that we always forget about communication is the listening piece. And that we're not very good listeners, and we got to get better at that. Especially as a leader, you got to be a better listener. But what I tell people is the only way you're going to be a better communicator is to do it. But I also tell people you got to make sure you got somebody there to make sure you're not doing dumb things. You know, anytime I'm going to write something that's going to go to anybody of any importance, I take it to my chief editor, who is my wife. And believe me, she has no problems hurting my feelings and bleeding all over my paper when it needs it. And so I always make sure that it is as good as I can make it before I send it out to anybody, because that is your reputation. You send out a memo, that's your reputation. You're making a phone call and you don't know how to communicate, you're not doing a good job communicating, that's your reputation. And so I think that, you know, you got to get comfortable doing that. And it's a skill, just like riding a bike. You can get good at communicating if you want to. It takes some effort, and it's going to take some hard lessons, but you can do it. The other piece of that I always talk about that's important as a leader is running meetings. And that's part of communicating as well. And it's a huge part in any business, any organization. We all run meetings, and we spend a lot of time in meetings. And a lot of times we are bored to death in meetings. If we're honest, as leaders, if we've ever run a meeting, we've run boring meetings. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we all have, but we don't have to. There are ways to make sure that your meetings are productive and efficient and people will want to come to them. You know, you got to have an agenda, and the agenda goes out not when they walk in the door. That's wasting everybody's time. You send it out 3, 4, 5 days ahead of time. That way they actually have time to do some research about what you want to talk about. There's a concept, right? They come prepared to talk about what you want. Then you got to stick to the agenda no matter what, and you got to have a time limit. If I'm in a meeting with you and that meeting has gone over an hour, I can tell you, you have lost me. I'm thinking about something, but it's not what about you're talking about. I'm thinking about fishing. I'm thinking about the ball game. I'm thinking about something else. So you got to have a time limit. The shorter, the better.
That's some really good points. And Elaney says, you know, the intentions behind your communications need to be made crystal clear. And I think that's important to say. It's not just communicating, but it's being clear. And, you know, the thing with a lot of times with leaders, you might have leaders who really don't like to talk, or really kind of put themselves out there. They might do memos, like you said, or emails. You know, what are you at 2023? What are you encouraging leaders to do in companies or organization? Get out there and speak, get out there and do things with the rank and file.
I'm a firm believer you cannot lead from behind a desk. I'm one of those guys. I always tell people I lead by walking around. That's what I do. Is now I got it. Leaders got to spend some time behind a desk. There's paperwork that has to be done and all those kinds of things. So I got it. You got to do some of that. But every chance you get, you need to be out there with your people, the people you have the privilege to lead. You got to be out there where they are. And you want to really start some communication. Go out there and talk to them where they work. You call somebody into your office, you're never going to get the straight answer. Because now it's the leader-led relationship in your office. They're never going to tell you all the truth. You go out there and you talk to them where they're working and ask them questions, they're going to tell you what they think. You got to get out there and talk to people. And I'm a firm believer. I got it in today's world with organizations all over the place and business all over the place. You got to send some memos and do some Zooms and those kinds of things. But anytime you can meet somebody face to face and talk to them, I'm a firm believer in that, because then you get to see their eyes when you're telling what you want. Talk about clear communication. If I tell you what I want and I'm looking at you, I can tell whether or not you understand what I'm asking you to do. And if you don't, or if I'm not getting a good message about that, I can say, okay, Jim, what did I just ask you to do? Get some brief back about what it was that they think. Because again, none of us are good listeners. What did they think they heard you ask them to do? And if they were right, then good. If not, then you can correct them before they get started on that project or whatever it is you've asked them to do.
That's a really good point. Some of the things I like about what leaders do is if you're working in a larger organization or company where they will do a road show, it might be twice a year, it might be once a year, depending on, again, you know, what's going on, and to really get out to, you know, meet the employees that, you know, really are working hard, and to help encourage them, but also to listen to them, like you said. The other thing I like what leaders sometimes do, or where they will have like a coffee chat, where it's an online thing where they'll have so many employees every month where they get to kind of round table and have a conversation, and the leader will listen and respond. And it's kind of nice to have that, because in some cases, you know, you view a leader, I'm probably never going to have a chance to interface with them. Here are some opportunities. It could be a town hall. It could be a road show. It could be at a customer event, a conference where they show up, or the leader has a coffee chat or some type of a roundtable event that could be either online or person to person. That's a great way to kind of get that communication across an organization or company. Let me ask you this question. Two-way communication these days seem to be a little bit more difficult. You know, what's some of your advice on establishing effective two-way communication between a leader and those who report to the leader?
Yeah, I think first of all, you got to build a relationship, and I think that's something that we don't do a good job anymore. We think we send a text and we built a relationship. That's not a relationship. You know, I tell every brand new lieutenant that we commission and every young leader that I talk to, this is a way to start that process. Every day, go out and find one person in your organization and find out one new thing about that person, not about work, about their personal life, what their spouse's name is, what their kids' names are, how many kids do they have, what sports do their kids play, what's their hobbies. Find something new, one thing new about one person in your organization every day. You'll start seeing that trust build exponentially. And it's all about trust. That's the relationship, and the communication is about trust. If they trust you, they're going to tell you. If they don't trust you, they're going to try to hide things. They're going to not bring up anything. So I think you got to build that trust. To go along with that, I think one of the worst things that leaders do today is when somebody brings them bad news, they shoot the messenger. You only have to do that once or twice, and nobody's bringing you any bad news anymore. And they're not stupid. They figure it out. So you got to understand that bad things are going to happen. That's okay. You want to know about those as a leader. But I think one of the things that we fall down on as a leader about communication with our people is that a lot of leaders today, again, think they send a text and communication's done. And I forget who it was that said it. And it's a great quote. And I think I even put it in my book. But he said, the problem with communication, the major problem with communication is that we think communication actually happened, and it hasn't. And so we got to make sure, if you're sending a text, get that back brief. Have them say, okay, this is what I think you are asking me to do. That's number one. Now you know they read the message, because lots of times they don't. And number two, now you know they understand what it is you're asking them to do, because they've told you exactly what it is that you asked them. And if it was wrong, then you have time to correct it at that point. If it's good, then let them go.
So for effective communication, why is critical listening so key?
Because it goes back to the trust thing. If you don't trust me enough to listen to what I'm having to say, then why should I bother? And I think the other piece of good listening is that a good leader should be asking some critical questions. Why are we doing that way? Is there a better way to do it? Is there something I can give you, a resource or something that will make your job better? And if you're not listening, then you don't pick those things up. And I think, again, that goes back to, you don't have all the answers. The only way you're going to get to use their expertise and their skills and their knowledge is to ask those critical questions and then listen to the answers. You may not agree with some of them, and that's okay, but at least you've listened to them and they know you've listened to them. Again, goes back to trust. Now you're building the trust with them. Even if you didn't use their suggestion, at least you asked them and you listened.
So in business, as it is in probably anything, a good leader, an effective leader, an important leader is only as good as his team, those that are really behind him or her. When it comes to, building an effective team, how do you build a winning culture, which helps motivate workers or members on the team, and then ultimately really helps that leader become successful?
Yeah, culture is huge. I'm a firm believer that is the lifeblood of your organization. If people don't know what the culture is, then how do they know what standards you want them to meet? So I think, culture, you got to, as the leader, got to decide what that culture is. It's usually based on values, whatever your values are, and that's as it should be. And then you got to communicate that to them, what the values are, what the culture is. Then you have to train them to that standard, what it is that you want them to be able to do, that you not only want them to, you're going to hold them to. Because when you give somebody a task, you expect them to meet a standard. If you haven't trained them to that standard, then how can you hold them to it? So you got to do that. Training is a huge part of getting everybody in the same culture. And then you got to live that culture. You got to be a leader of integrity, because once your integrity is gone, you're not a leader anymore. That's the number one ingredient of a leader. You got to be a leader of character. You got to do what's right because it's the right thing to do. Even when it may not be in your best interest, you still got to do it. And you got to set the example in everything you do every day. I always used to think, if your boss if he's supposed to be there till 5 o'clock and he leaves at 4:45, why can't you leave at 4:45? I mean, you got to set that example, because you set a new standard every time you do something. You either raise it or lower it, but people are watching, and you got to be that. If you expect other people to live up to your culture, you got to live up to it first.
That's a really good point. That is an extremely important point. Earlier, we talked about with a leader going out there and really kind of interfacing and really getting to know those that report up to the leader. When it comes to really investing quality time, what are some of the things you recommend to leaders when it comes to really kind of investing in quality time? What can they do?
Number one, be where your people are whenever possible. I know when I was in the Army, if my soldiers were in the motor pool working on tanks, I was in the motor pool as much as I could be. Again, I got it. Leaders do have to do other things, but as much as possible, be where they are. That is so huge. And I'll give you an example. I was a company commander. We were out on the tank range, had a bunch of privates. They were sitting up on top of a tank, eating an MRE for lunch. So I walk by and I grab an MRE. I jump up there on the tank with them. I'm eating MRE with them, and I'm talking to them. I asked them what their goals in the Army were, what their goals in life were after the Army, if they didn't plan on staying in. And I gave them some advice. I gave them some ways to improve their life. And I actually had somebody about a year and a half ago who was one of those young men sitting on top of that tank. And he called me. He found me on LinkedIn and he called me. And he said to me, you don't remember me. He said, and he explained the situation. I said, well, you're right. I don't remember your name, but I certainly remember that day like it was yesterday. And he said, I took your advice. I became a leader. I finished my 4-year enlistment. I got out. I went to college, went through ROTC. I became an officer. I did my 20 years in the Army, and now I'm a leader in the business world. So those little things, if I hadn't been out with those soldiers, with the people I was leading, that would never have happened. So I think you got to get out there and be with them every chance you get. And one of the things I always tell people, and I didn't come up with this, I had a boss who retired, a 3-star general, who told me one day, he said, Oak, never, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said 2 things happen when you do that. Number one, you show everybody who works there with you that you're human. You got to get your own cup of coffee just like they do. Nobody's bringing it to you. He said, and number 2, if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways to get to the coffee pot and back to your office. And that way you can stop along the way and talk to people and get to know them.
That's really good. We do have a question coming in from Mario, and he says, Oak, why are leaders tougher on hard workers than lazy ones? That's a very good question.
That is a great question. And they shouldn't be, but they are. And the reason they are is because lots of leaders are lazy. Instead of training the lazy ones or getting rid of them, if need be, they just pile more and more stuff on the people they know that are going to get the job done. And that's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And here's the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss is going to accept that. Or if they don't, they'll go to that person who's the lazy one and say, you're not meeting the standards, fix it. And then they walk away. A leader is going to say, okay, Jim, you're not meeting the standard. This is why. This is what the standard is. This is what you're doing. Here's the difference. And here's how we're going to fix it. And then you got to retrain that person. Spend the time, the effort to retrain them and put it in writing. These are the things we're going to do over the next 6 months, year, whatever time frame you want to put it. And then do those things. And then at the end of that 6 months or year, whatever was in the writing, if they're still not meeting the standards, then they have self-selected to go work somewhere else, as far as I'm concerned. But good leaders should not overburden the good workers because they're too afraid to go confront the lazy workers.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it has to, as a leader, you have to really kind of do a self-assessment of you as a leader. Obviously, I don't think that's very effective, but this could also go into the aspect of motivation. Can you talk a little bit about, why it's so critical to have proper motivation when you're a leader?
Yeah. I always say, when I was in the Army, motivating my people was very simple. I said, look, we support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We defend the American way of life. Let's go win this battle. I never had a problem motivating somebody doing that. When I started working at the food bank, That didn't work. So, I had to figure out what it was that motivated them. And here's what I tell people. People want a sense of purpose. That's what motivates people. Not money, not fame. For most people, that's not what it is. Again, we all want to get paid. We all want to get recognized, and we should. But that's not what motivates them to do their job generally. They're motivated because they have a sense of purpose. We all want a sense of purpose in everything we do, whether it's our work, our relationships, our hobbies, whatever it is. So the way to find what that sense of purpose, the reason that they probably joined your organization in the first place, is to find out what makes your organization unique. If you figure that out, then you can probably figure out what it is that motivates the people. And I'll give you an example. When I took over the food bank, again, I was struggling a little bit trying to figure out what it was that made people want to come to the food bank, because we certainly weren't paying them very much, and they weren't getting any recognition. So what was it that motivated them? And one day we were doing a meeting trying to figure out the food handout event that we were going to have in about a month probably. And it was the biggest handout we did every year. I mean, it was huge. And at 4:00, I saw everybody looking at their watch and closing their books. And I said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, sir, it's time to go home. It's 4:00. And I said, "But we're not done here." And they said, "But it's 4:00. And I said, "Okay. If you want to leave, go ahead and leave." I said, "But before you leave, let me make one thing perfectly clear. If a month from now, whenever this event happens, some 19-year-old unmarried young lady has to go home and can't feed her 2-year-old daughter because we messed this up, it's your fault." How many people you think left? 0. Figured it out. They really were there to help people. Just had to be reminded of that. But that's why they joined that organization. So if you can figure out what makes your organization unique, you can figure out what motivates people.
Yeah, right before the broadcast, you and I were talking, and I was kind of explaining, I'm a purpose-driven person myself, and I was kind of telling you what my
Most people
future plans were, and what you just talked about actually really kind of fit me to a T. So I appreciate you covering that.
Well, also, Jim, I think part of that motivation thing is that in a lot of organizations, not everybody wants to move up. Some people are happy right where they are. But I think that one of the things you have to have in your organization is a system where they can move up if they want to. Some professional development, some training, some certifications, so that if they want to move up to that next level, you provide that for them. That way, you're not always just going outside your organization to pick the next generation of leaders. You're growing some of them. And that kind of goes back to baseball. The best teams are the ones who grow their organization, their team from the farm league. They're not the ones who go out and get the free agents.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So let's talk about another way you and I became connected, and that's going to be the book that I really enjoy. I have it next to me here. I have it bookmarked in different spots. I kind of didn't want to highlight it, so I put little stickies in there where there's nuggets that you really have really kind of opened my eyes a lot related to leadership. And that the book is Your Leadership Legacy: Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. Now, this is not the only book you wrote, and you're currently, I believe, writing a book right now. Correct?
So I'm not writing it yet. I wrote the table of contents, but I'm not going to start writing it till my last day on my day job.
Okay, there you go. So in the Your Leadership Legacy, can you really kind of explain the genesis of the book and how it came about?
So my last duty assignment on active duty, I ran an Army ROTC program. So I was producing the next generation of leaders. And at one of my purposes, one of my jobs was to go out and talk to high school kids and college students and try to motivate them to come in and be in ROTC and eventually become an Army officer. And I'd always go out when I talk to high school students, especially, but college students as well. I'd say, "Okay, so what profession do you want to do, and what do you want to be?" And they'd tell me what profession, and then they'd say, "And I want to be a leader." And I'd say, "Well, great. The world needs more leaders and good leaders. What does it take to be a good leader?" And they'd look at me like, "I don't know." They had no idea. And they were probably wanted to be the leader for the wrong reason, because they wanted a title or privileges or better pay. And let's face it, those things come with being a leader most of the time, and that's okay. as long as that's not the only reason you want to be the leader. If that's the only reason you want to be the leader, go do something else, because you're not going to be a good one. So I came up with a presentation that I've been given since 2006. And of course, I added to it and subtracted and updated it and things, but talking about what it takes to be a good leader. And I always wanted to write this book and kind of put that presentation into that book so that I could reach more people, because really that's my passion, is to reach as many people as I can about leadership, because I think we're not doing a good job. So I was thinking about writing it, and I went to a motivational speaker who was at our Catholic church, and great speaker. And if you ever get a chance to listen to Jonathan Fanning, you need to do so. He's a great motivational speaker. And it was kind of a combination motivational speaking and how to grow the Catholic Church kind of event. And during the breaks, because he talked for about 45 minutes, take a 15-minute break, I'd go up and talk to him every time we had a break and kind of explain to him what I wanted to do and my vision and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the last break, when I was talking to him, he looked at me and he said, "Oak, have you written a book?" And I said, "Well, you know, Jonathan, I'm thinking about it." And he looked at me and said, "Stop thinking about it and write it." Well, I went home that night and I wrote out the table of contents. That was on the 15th of February, 2020. And I started writing it the next day, and I published the book on the 12th of February, 2021.
Oh, very good. Let me grab it here, because this is what the book, Your Leadership Legacy. I got the hardback, which I really appreciate having the hardback, because it's a little bit more hardy for me to be able to kind of abuse it by, marking things in the book and pulling passages and things like that out. For someone who would be looking at this book, as a business person or working for an organization, and they want to become a leader, or they're currently a leader, how can that book interface with them in what they're looking to do in their career?
Yeah, well, first of all, one of the major parts of that book is it says in it, and I believe it 100%, that leadership is leadership. Doesn't matter where you learned how to lead, doesn't matter where you practiced how to lead. Leadership is about people, period. Bottom line, it's about people. If you know how to lead and deal with people, you can lead any organization. Again, I proved that. Going from the Army to the food bank, 180 degrees, it can be done. So I think, first of all, you got to understand that those skills that you do have are transferable to whatever job you have or whatever profession you decide to jump into. The other part of what I think is important about that book is I am not a theory guy. I understand leadership theory. I've studied it. There is no talk of theory in my book whatsoever. It is all about everyday things that everyday leaders can do every day to improve their leadership skills, their abilities, and to improve their organization, which in the end, that's what leadership is about, is improving your people and your organization. And if you get that right, then you're going to get the things you want. Because I get people all the time that say, "Colonel McCulloch, I hear you talk about servant leadership and it's not about me, but I really want my next raise. I really want my next promotion." And I tell them, you're going to get it if you do what I'm telling you to do in the book, because your people are going to be better. They're going to make the organization better, and you're going to get your recognition, but you're going to get it for the right reasons, not because you were greedy or selfish, but because you helped other people become the best person they could be for the organization and for themselves. And if you do that, then I think you'll find that you're going to get what you want in the end.
Yeah, focus on that vision and focus on the mission. It's important to do that, and really kind of have that eye on the prize. Instead of looking at self-interest, look at purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? And you're going to be appreciated as a leader, and you're going to be respected. And I think you're going to command without really commanding people. So that's an important thing.
I've had other people, like you said, they've put book, tabs in it. I've seen people held it up and it's highlighted. And I've had people actually say that they keep it on their desk at work, and they'll come along in a situation that they think, they'll go thumb back through it and find something and read it and say, yeah, I can use that, or might just change it a little bit, but use the concept that I put in the book. So I think there's stuff in there for every leader, whether they're brand new, aspiring to be a leader, or just starting to be a leader, or whether they've been a leader for 40 years. I had a Marine Corps Major General send me a message. and said, Oak, I read your book. He said, I didn't learn a whole lot of new things in it. I do a lot of those things. He said, I learned a few new techniques of how to do some of the things that all good leaders do. He said, but what I really took out of it was this. As I was reading along, I ran across something, and I said to myself, I don't do that very well anymore. I used to do that really well. Maybe I need to spend some time to get back to doing that as well as I should be.
Yeah, and the your books can be purchased on Amazon. Any other retailers that they can purchase your books from?
I think you can also get it through Walmart online. You can't buy it in the store, but I think you can get it online.
You can
and then
order
you
it.
could, if you're looking for a signed copy, you can always contact me on my webpage, and we'll figure out the best way to make that happen.
Okay, and then the other thing too, I want to make sure that people do understand is that you are a keynote speaker, and also you are a leadership trainer. Can you go into just a little bit about the being keynote speaker and then your leadership training?
Yeah, so I'm available if you got an organization, event, a conference, a symposium, leadership training, whatever. All you got to do is contact me again through my website or through LinkedIn, and we can talk about what that looks like. And I've done everything from an hour-long presentation to a workshop for half a day, and probably could do more than that if somebody was looking for that. And I also do some training. So there's a company that hired me to come and help with a training event, and it was a scenario-driven event that I helped develop. And then I watched them go through it. And then I gave them some feedback about how they could be better at things they did well, because they did some things well, and some things they didn't do so well, and how to improve their communication, their interoperability, and those kinds of things. And I'm always willing to do those kinds of things.
Okay, Oak, I have to ask this question. You had already alluded to it. The new book, you already wrote out the table of contents. Is there any little things that you can share, or is it going to be top secret for now?
No, I'm happy to share. I give a second presentation called Secrets to Success. And I always caveat that with, we all know there's no secrets to success. We all know what it takes to be successful. The hard part is actually doing it and coming up with some ways to make sure that you do that. And so a couple of things that are going to be in there is, again, it's a second presentation I give. And I've given it several times, and happy to do that presentation for a company if that's what they want. But it's how to set a goal and how to accomplish goals, how to manage your time, how to delegate, use your people better, how to communicate. Again, we'll talk about communication in that book, just like we did in the leadership book, because again, communication is important no matter what profession, no matter if you are a leader or not. And we'll also talk in that book about developing good habits, developing self-discipline. So just some everyday things that we can do in our lives that will help us be more successful.
Very good. And you have someone who's halfway through your book.
Well, thanks, David.
Yeah, I just started reading on a Saturday, and I read the whole thing. I mean,
it's only 183 pages long. I mean, it's not a novel. And I did that on purpose. I wanted it to be like a workbook type thing where you could reference back to it and you could get through it and not have to think about, well, I got to finish this book. I've had people said they finished it in 3 hours. I mean, so it's not a hard read. I'm just a dumb farm boy, no big words in there. And no theory. So it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's the kind of book where you read it in an afternoon, and you're like, it's just all the neurons are firing off going, oh, wow, I should try this. I should try that. Because the thing with it is that, the way you go through it in your book, you really have a lifelong, you being, military and also involved in other companies, organizations and things like that. And your life lessons have taught you so much. It's just transferring that information. It's in the book, and it's just rich full of really good learning opportunities for you that can really vastly improve yourself as a leader. Or if you want to become a leader, it's really kind of setting the pathway for you to say, follow this, do this. This is what effective leaders are. And I think that's important for people to take away from the book.
That is why I wrote the book, was I thought I was writing it mainly, and I think I did, for young and aspiring leaders. But again, I don't care if you've been a leader for 40 years. I think you'll pull something out of there that you can use that will benefit you as a leader. If you ever think you can't learn anything else as a leader, you're done. Go do something else.
So true. So, Oak, how can people get in contact with you, learn more about you? Website, LinkedIn, that type of stuff, social
Yeah,
media?
so I have my own website, ltcoakmcculloch.com. And it has my cell phone number on there, and it has my home, my work email that I answer all the time. And I would love to get in contact with people that way. But then I'm also on all the social media. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on YouTube. I've got some videos and everything set up on YouTube if you want to go watch some of that. I've got been on about 75, 76 podcasts. I got a bunch of those, links to those on my website, so you can go and listen to some of those if you want. But would love to connect with whoever wants to connect with me.
Perfect. Well, is there anything we didn't talk about that you'd want to leave, or I think we covered a lot tonight?
We did. We talked about some key things that you really got to do if you want to be a leader. You got to take care of your people, period, because that's what leadership is about, and certainly servant leadership, and you got to be able to communicate, and you got to come up with your culture and your vision and your plan. I think if a young leader can at least start there, I think that they got a good shot of having a good career. The other piece of that is listening piece. Going back to that, is listen to the people who have been there a while. I remember my first platoon Sergeant First Class Penson, who unfortunately has since passed away and retired a Master Sergeant. He was 6'6", 250-pound Mississippi boy. I mean, he was as hard as nails. And I give him a lot of credit for teaching me the things I needed to know as a young lieutenant to be successful. And I think lots of times people who are in leadership positions forget that they can learn just as much from the people they're leading as they can from anybody who's leading them.
Very good, Oak. I so greatly appreciate this opportunity to have a conversation with you. Hopefully everyone who's watching this live has a lot of great takeaways from it, and also those who are going to be watching in the replay. Make sure that you like and share this with other colleagues. Again, doesn't matter if you're in the global protective coatings and corrosion industries or whatever industry or organization you are, this leadership series really can really be beneficial for anybody who is either a leader or wants to be a leader, or you want to motivate the next generation. Please share and everything like that. Next Monday, I'll have another. This is a 4-part series, so we'll have another stream that will happen as well. And just stay tuned for updates and posts and all that kind of good stuff like that. Oak, have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on the show. This has been great.
Thank you. All right, everybody, have a good one. We'll see you next Monday.